I love the laughter and clapping. Yay. Okay. Yes, we're going to have a vivacious time today, 25 minutes. We're going to talk about conflict resiliency. So when I say conflict, I want you to say resiliency. We're going to practice this. Conflict.
Resiliency.
Yes. Okay, my work here is done. That was my talk. Okay, so this is me. I'm 43-year-old Cuban Caucasian. I go by she, they. And I'm wearing a maroon jacket and a teal top. I was born and raised in the southern U.S. I live on Ohlone lands in San Jose, California. I'm white passing, graduate educated, and able-bodied passing. That's my privilege. And that creates a lens that I'm talking to you from today. Unfortunately, my co-presenter, Molli Aronce, my partner in crime, she's not here today, but she made a very short video that I'm going to play the first part now, and then we'll see her at the end with some fun music. If the audio is working. Is the audio working?
But rather than having the equivalent of the state in this context would be these platform companies, these big tech companies like Meta, Apple, whoever else that can manage these terms of service where,
we're
they
playing
have
all kinds of things at the same
violation
time.
on the software programs.
Apologies. That was interesting. Looks like I got to play two things. We're going to try that again. Listen to Molli. Here we go.
Hi, I'm Molli, and I'm a seasoned community manager. I've been immersed in this field, witnessing and experiencing it all, and I continue to have deep empathy for the communities I've worked with. It was through community work that I met Dr. Ruth Diaz, the brilliant psychologist, conflict resiliency innovator, and immersive reality leader. She's going to dive deeper in this talk on levels that need to be heard. Her work is unmet and must be absorbed.
Thanks, Molli. I miss you. Okay. There we go. One more time. There we go.
Hi,
We're good with that. Okay. So what do? I'm a DEI practitioner. I do conflict resiliency trainings. I'm an organizational and leadership consultant. I'm an environmental designer. And I also do community design. So lots of different roles. I have two businesses, Figure It In, and also VR Create Connect. And these are different areas I specialize. Before I got sucked down that rabbit hole called XR, it was just Figure It In. VR Create Connect was born out of applying some of the concepts of conflict resiliency into XR. I have two movements that are currently going. One just born within the last month. The other one's been going on about a year. We're going to talk a little bit about both of those today. The Troll Project and Bridge Makers, both incorporating conflict resiliency. So this is what we're doing today, talking about conflict. We're going to look at a case study, and we're going to talk about space making versus space taking. So why conflict resilience? First of all, when we attempt to resolve something, it takes us out of the moment, and that can keep us from being present and slowing things down. So I've renamed conflict resolution, conflict resiliency, to help us identify those micro conflicts and the diverse perspectives that are always happening in any given moment. As we build emotional fluency, we see more creative opportunities to change what's happening, and we go more into responding than reacting. This is all sourcing from a model I developed in 2015, working in inpatient psychiatry. It used to be called the Returning to Compassion model, and it was adapted to organizations in 2017 and renamed the DOT model. And that's your recipe. If you don't remember anything else today, remember deepen, orient, transform. And then it was brought into VR in 2019. You can learn more about that at the website Figure It In. This is me and some of the volunteers and crew that I've worked with over time, prototyping and playing with this model in virtual reality. And we are back to PowerPoint and slides today, but if you do want to learn the DOT model in 3D, send me a note. We're going to jump right in, though, and I'm going to give you just a very lightning fast preview of what the DOT model looks like. We're not going to get all the way through it, but we have to recognize what conflict is for us individually before we can start to solve those problems as developers. So first of all, conflict is often a sense of messiness, of cringe, of ick, and it builds off of that sense of disruption. Things made sense and then they don't. I'm going to go through some definitions pretty quick, but this is being filmed, so you'll be able to review it later. So culture, by popular statements of many people, shared set of beliefs and rituals that tell us how to behave together. And archetypes are one way we express culture and tell stories. They come out through symbols and characters, and they're about patterns of behaviors that we can recognize and react to in any given moment. But when we go into this idea of scarcity, of not having enough, then those cultural archetypes start to turn dark. So we can see the villain or bully, the victim or target. We're starting to build this idea of what conflict is. Most of us are so fixated on both of those that we don't realize there's two other archetypes that are often involved: the victor or hero, and then our vicar or bystander. And they have feelings and behaviors that are connected. So I can get activated in any one of these, and the way I can recognize it is that physical sensation from fear that might make me want to fight, flight, fix, or freeze. There's other models that cover 3 out of these 4, but this is the first one I've ever seen that does all 4. So in XR, what kind of conflict do we encounter? This is just a general list, but it's this idea of we can have the application or the developers versus the community. Maybe there's offensive content happening for some group or population. The developers might be removing features of a product, or they might be putting in features that are subpar. So there's a conflict growing there. You can also have conflict within the community towards the community. Maybe they're having trouble with how they're connecting, the visibility that they're looking for with content production, or maybe their access to the product is being limited or changed, and they're vying and competing for it. And sometimes community members want access to developers, and so they can kind of fight for that choice spot or attention. We're not going to talk as much about developer-developer conflict, but I do also work with that as a consultant. And those can be also around scarcity and resources of budget and team. So the conflict we're going to look at today, we're going to look at it from the beginning where, when we play a game or we experience something in XR, it's amazing, it's exciting. The name of this conference is Awe. So we can look at developers and applications like they're in that hero role. They fixed a problem. They're making it better for us. And that can often put us into a kind of frozen state. Just even wearing a headset, my body is being mostly still. And then I am feeling a lot of feelings, but maybe they're not matching my body language. But then the mess happens. Something breaks. Something isn't working. Ugh. So the community, when that mess comes, might frame it as, wow, my hero has fallen. They became my villain. And they also might feel like they've become a victim. But from the developer frame, it might go a different direction. They might feel targeted and victimized by the community or users. They might even feel victimized by other developers who didn't do their jobs. And now they're all getting that reputation. So we're going to look at these 3 levels. Paper cut, or another word for that is friction, which we'll see on the next page. That idea of like something irritating that's kind of bothersome. Maybe the UI is broken. Maybe we didn't get the communication we were expecting. Maybe just something's going wrong and we don't know if it's an upgrade or it's a bug. But Then there's that next level, which is like the burn. It's that constant sense, nagging sense of something's wrong and it's not working the way I need it to. And then finally, we get into that invasive feeling of stab. This is where it gets more dangerous for everybody because there's a sense of almost being attacked. So here's a different way, and we're listing it as friction over here. So in the beginning, friction can be really good, and gaming friction is necessary sometimes to feel really like excited and like you're being challenged. But if it keeps going and it's not being controlled well enough, it can turn into that burn, eventually that stab, and ultimately churn. That's where your users go away, your community leaves. Now we're going to talk about a story. This happened about 2 months ago. And I was in a position as an embedded community member of sorts. I'm doing an ethnographic study that I'll show you a little bit more about later. And I was immersed in a community that was involved in a competition for world building and social VR. And the creators got together and did this collaboration led by this one creator. Unfortunately, when the announcement was given of whose worlds made it, there was a mistake made. The popular choice was not on the list. And it was a really extraordinary experience. And everybody was very distressed and concerned. So one of the community members knew one of the developers personally, and they sent a direct message and said, WTF. The developer was asked, because there was a weekend coming, and this was a very short featuring reward, only 7 days. The developer was asked to send, when they admitted that there had been a mistake, they were asked to send a direct message to the creator in charge and apologize, which they did. Awesome. So you can see that's coded as purple. That was resiliency. That was humbling. But they didn't offer to follow up. No restoration was proposed. And so the content creator, knowing the weekend's coming, here they had got all these people together to build this amazing experience, they were still pretty upset, pretty enraged. And so they were threatening to remove all their content, even though they'd gotten this message. So the community came together again and helped compose this message, and just really got in front of that creator and said, you know, you're too upset to do this, but there were professionals within that community that knew how it worked in corporate, and the whole goal was, let's help them say yes. Let's make this easy. So this was the letter that was sent. Just one paragraph, very simple. But for creators who are spending hundreds of hours sometimes collaborating and having lots of friction and tension and conflict with each other and finally get a product out, to have a mistake like this can be really devastating. So having somebody who had cooler mind and more experience professionally was able to come in. I'm going to give you a trauma warning here because it gets worse. And if you do have triggers around suicide, this might be a moment to step out. It'll be about 5 minutes, probably less. So this is the rest of the story, this cycle. So that community support on Monday led to the world being featured for 4 out of the 7 days, which was better than nothing, but not great. There was no formal contact or apology from the application. About a month later, an argument broke out between the creator and some of the community members. It's unclear what that argument was completely centered around, but it led to this creator taking a physical reality gun and playing Russian roulette in front of those creators. One of them was me. I have experience in crisis call work. I've done 2 years of crisis call work back in the day. And this was a very different experience. It was a level of terror that I've never felt before. And it helped me understand that this amazing technology that can help us feel so seen and connected and like our dreams are coming true, whatever that amplification is that we don't feel in physical reality with each other, it can go the exact opposite direction. It can go that dark and that deep. And what it led to was a very overwhelmed community leader trying to talk this community member down, which worked for the moment. But mostly, there was no training, there was no support, and there was nobody to report to for various reasons. And so the next day, everybody returned as if nothing had happened. There was no follow-up, and there was no interventions. Multiple community members have faded out of that community since, including me. So this is an example of where developers had this great idea, really beautiful worlds were produced out of this, but it led to losing creators. And also, it's not the only reason that happened, but just understanding that when we're not investing in our communities and educating them and training them on how to be in these very volatile situations, things can just get worse and worse. And I do think some of what happened with this situation led to this. It's hard to say. Part of my recovery, even though that wasn't about me, it deeply affected me, was to talk about it and share it. So I wrote this story. I started to network with suicide researchers from around the world. Because of my experience working in applications and being connected to developers in multiple applications, I'm very aware and have had confirmation that suicide protocols do not exist in social VR apps. Just has never been done. So, as you can see over to the right, a white paper was begun that now is 85 pages long and has multiple collaborators on it that is actually making proposals for best practices for both the applications themselves and also community leaders. What kind of training is needed as a minimum amount for leaders that are spending most of their time in these apps supporting community? And how do we set those standards and utilize this technology? What did we learn? So for community, make it easy for the company to say yes and act. This is going back to when the initial conflict happened. Very hard thing to realize after years of being in this work. Don't expect justice. These are corporations, and they aren't based off of the same ideas we expect with our governments. Seek counsel on how to respond and request change. And then recognizing and addressing flags for risk-taking. In hindsight, I can see that things like substance use by this creator, threatening to delete all their content, those were flags. But in the moments, I didn't catch it. For developers, the personal apology was surprising to me. I was really impressed. But the lack of follow-up as a company, that was problematic. And so this is a piece where conflict resiliency needs to be a regular training within companies also. Competitions. We think of competitions like somebody has to lose for it to feel good, but is that really true? Question this with your team. Look at ways to acknowledge everybody who puts hundreds of hours into sometimes content creation. Consider a direct message, phone call, consider ways to reach out and be a human being. And then, I've mentioned it before, education, crisis response protocols are really important here. Now we're going to talk about space taking versus making. These are two movements or initiatives that I'm involved with and lead. The Troll Project has been going on for a year. Bridgemakers just started. And they're kind of like sister projects. We're going to talk about these more. So here's some key misunderstandings that I hear across the board, no matter who the stakeholders are around trolling. One of them is anonymity creates violence. I disagree. After talking to probably 100 plus trolls at this point, I believe anonymity creates vulnerability. And that's different. That means that what's inside of us, if we haven't become very conscious of that, can be very extreme, intense emotions. And when we have that anonymity, they just kind of come out. But if we're given structure and guidance, it can turn into real reflection and honesty. Instead of thinking trolls just want attention, recognize that trolls want identity. That when we come into social spaces, in games or immersive VR, and people don't acknowledge that we're there, that takes away our identity. How do we give that back? How do we acknowledge that that is a real human need? It's okay to need identity. And what is our responsibility as a community to participate in that? Trolls are psychopaths. I've heard this many times. I don't think that's true. I think we're misestimating what is temporary states in people to be permanent traits about them. Early trolls don't talk about provoking a painful response in people. They just want to provoke any response. If everybody's ignoring me when I come into a room, I want to be like, hey, can you hear me? I'm right here. Block and ban, it's a fast knee-jerk response. It's part of our punitive justice system that has come into our technology. But it doesn't help community. It's an individual, temporary solution, but it's not a community solution. So I'm going to check time here. How are we doing? Is that all the time I have left? My God. Okay, well, we're going to skip this video then. How did that go so fast? So this video, you can see it was just released on the website. It's an amazing video talking to an ex-troll who explains how he found his way out of trolling and what he learned in now being a moderator and working with trolls. He even has an avatar that's a roller coaster that you can get on and ride. So I would encourage you to watch it. It's about 5 minutes. So another learning here. For community asynchronous responding, so just because you're yelling or pushing into my space, holding my ground and holding non-judgmental curiosity is incredibly powerful when people are trolling. And considering the invitation before reproaching somebody. Invite them in, say hello. For developers, think proactive versus reactive. Create paths. A lot of these people are onboarding with just a few instructions after being in games that are zero-sum mindset. I win, you have to lose. And then they're coming into a game that is labeled a game, but they can't win it. Think about paths that invite and set boundaries. Creating interpersonal skills training education. There are some great experiments that have happened with big gaming companies on this. Just teaching players that, giving encouraging remarks to your teammates will help you win. Makes a huge difference. And then instead of focusing AI on just negative behavior, what if we focused it on flagging early antisocial behavior and rewarding people when they're actually engaging in a healthy way? If we had time, I would play this clip by Aronce Marie. She's a community space designer, brilliant, multiple apps.
I love her dearly.
She's epic. I encourage you to look her up and hire her. She talks about path and purpose and the importance of asking people what is their path and purpose, and that she grows environments that make as many paths for everybody as possible. She's part of the new Bridgemakers initiative. And this is the final video by Molli.
Here is my plea to the devs of the world in all realities. Stay curious, ask questions, learn what community management is to fully understand the many ways to work with the communities you are building for. Use the product or service you're building and use it with your community manager. For each question, dive deep, go with your intuition, and seek to fully understand every aspect. Make time to interact on a human level with the community. If you're asking for feedback, listen to absorb and not to react, and validate. Conflict is an opportunity for growth and product improvement. Most people involved have a similar goal, and there are more than two perspectives. The TLDR: keep talking, share, collaborate, and build together.
So, yeah, that was it. If you'd like to talk more, yay, thank you. That is my QR code to send me a LinkedIn invite. Thank you, thank you.
Thank you for sharing your movements and message. I encourage everyone to connect and stay involved. How powerful was this session?
Incredible.
Yeah, thank you.